The rain fell steadily on Arlington National Cemetery, turning the December morning into a gray wash of sorrow. Black umbrellas clustered around Section 60 like dark flowers, where three-star General William Morrison was being laid to rest. The funeral was invitation only, restricted to military brass, government officials, and selected family members. At the security checkpoint, a woman stood in the rain without an umbrella. Water streamed down her weathered face and soaked through her simple black coat. She was 61 years old, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and hands that trembled slightly, not from cold but from Parkinson's, still in its early stages. "Name?" the young Army corporal asked, checking his tablet. "Sarah Coleman," she replied quietly. He scrolled through the list, scrolled again. "I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not on the guest list. This is a restricted funeral." "I know, I just need 5 minutes to say goodbye." The corporal's partner, a sergeant, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I understand you might have known the general, but without authorization we can't let you through. Orders are orders." Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand orders, Sergeant, better than you might think." She turned to look at the funeral proceedings in the distance. Even from here, she could see the honor guard, the flag-draped casket, the gathering of important people who thought they knew William Morrison. "Were you friends with the general?" the corporal asked, his tone softening slightly. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "We served together a long time ago." "I'm sorry, but that doesn't change anything. You'll have to leave." A black town car pulled up behind Sarah, and a woman in expensive funeral attire stepped out, sheltered immediately by an assistant with an umbrella. This was Victoria Morrison Blackwell, the general's daughter. She walked past Sarah without a glance, showing her ID to the guards. "Of course, Mrs. Blackwell, please go right through." Victoria paused, noticing Sarah for the first time. She took in the cheap coat, the lack of umbrella, the worn shoes. "Is there a problem here, Sergeant?" "Just someone trying to access the funeral without authorization, ma'am. We're handling it." Victoria looked at Sarah with undisguised disdain. "Some people have no respect for private ceremonies. This is a funeral for heroes, not a public spectacle for attention seekers." Sarah met her gaze steadily. "I'm not seeking attention, just closure." "Closure?" Victoria laughed coldly. "What could someone like you possibly need closure for? Did you serve him coffee at some event? Clean his office? People always think brief service interactions make them special." "Something like that," Sarah said softly. Victoria had already dismissed her, walking through the checkpoint while talking on her phone about the reception arrangements at the Army-Navy Club. Sarah stood in the rain for another moment, then reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out something small and metallic, keeping it concealed in her palm. She'd carried it for 35 years. Today was supposed to be the day she gave it back. "Ma'am, I need you to move along," the sergeant said more firmly. "You're holding up the line." Sarah looked past him at the funeral. The chaplain was speaking now, his words lost in the distance and rain. She turned to go, then stopped. Her coat had shifted, revealing a small patch on the collar that she usually kept hidden. It was faded and worn, a red lightning bolt through a black spade. The insignia of the 3rd Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group. But more than that, it had a small addition that most people wouldn't notice, 3 tiny stars above the lightning bolt. "Wait," the corporal said suddenly. He was young but had studied military history extensively. "That patch is that." Sarah quickly adjusted her coat to hide it. "It's nothing." But the sergeant had seen it too. His expression changed. "That's a Night Stalker patch, but modified. I've only seen that modification in one place, in a classified briefing about Operation Red Sand." Sarah went very still. "You're mistaken." Red Sand was in 1989. Panama, Black Ops mission that went sideways. Whole team was supposedly KIA except for... The sergeant's voice trailed off. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly into a secure military database. "Please don't," Sarah said quietly. But it was too late. The sergeant's face went pale as he read. "Master Sergeant Sarah Coleman, Night Stalkers attached to Delta Force for Operation Red Sand. Silver Star with Valor, 3 bronze stars, 4 purple hearts." He looked up at her. "You're supposed to be dead." "I was for a while." Sarah's voice was barely audible over the rain. More cars were arriving. Important people in dress uniforms, congressional representatives, Pentagon officials. They all passed by the strange scene at the checkpoint, guards standing at attention for a rain-soaked woman in a cheap coat. Commander Jessica Hayes, General Morrison's aide-de-camp, arrived in a staff car. She was responsible for funeral security and immediately noticed the disruption at the checkpoint. "What's going on here?" she demanded, approaching briskly. The sergeant was still staring at his phone. "Commander, this woman, she's Master Sergeant Sarah Coleman." Hayes frowned. "That's impossible. Coleman died in Panama in 1989. She's on the memorial wall at Fort Bragg." "Check for yourself, ma'am." The sergeant showed her his phone. Hayes read the classified file, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock. She looked at Sarah more carefully, noting things she'd missed at first glance. The way Sarah stood despite her age and apparent infirmity, still at attention even when relaxed. The 1,000-yard stare that came from seeing too much. The careful positioning that kept her back protected and sight lines clear. "My God," Hayes breathed. "You're the ghost of Panama. You're the one who held the bridge." Sarah closed her eyes. "That was a long time ago. You held that bridge for 6 hours. Alone, against 200 enemy combatants. You saved General Morrison's entire unit." The guards at the checkpoint had gone silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. "Wait," the corporal said. "General Morrison was at Red Sand." "Lieutenant Morrison," Sarah corrected. "He was 23, green as grass, good heart though, brave when it counted." Hayes stepped closer. "The report said you stayed behind to hold the extraction point, that you were overrun." "I was, but dying takes longer than you'd think when you're stubborn." "How did you survive?" Sarah's hand unconsciously went to her abdomen, where even through the coat, Hayes could see her pressing against old wounds. "Local family found me 3 days later in a drainage ditch, nursed me back. By the time I could travel, I was already listed as KIA. Seemed easier to stay that way." "Easier? You gave up everything. Your career, your benefits, your honor." "I kept my honor," Sarah interrupted sharply. "Honor isn't what others say about you. It's what you know about yourself." Commander Hayes stood in the rain, her mind racing. The woman before her was a legend, a ghost story told in Special Forces training, and she was being turned away from the funeral of a man she'd saved. "You need to come with me," Hayes said. "The general's widow should know you're here." Sarah shook her head. "Margaret doesn't know me. William and I, we agreed it was better that way." "You've been in contact with General Morrison." "Once a year, every year, on the anniversary of Red Sand." Sarah's voice was distant, lost in memory. "He'd call from a burner phone. We'd talk for 5 minutes, never more. He'd ask if I needed anything. I'd always say no. He'd thank me again. I'd tell him to stop. Same conversation 34 years running." Victoria Morrison Blackwell had returned, annoyed by some detail about the reception. She saw the guards still talking to Sarah and her irritation flared. "Why is this woman still here? We have senators arriving. The Secretary of Defense will be here any moment. This is embarrassing." Hayes turned to her. "Mrs. Blackwell, this woman saved your father's life." Victoria laughed dismissively. "My father saved his own life many times. He didn't need help from." She gestured vaguely at Sarah, whoever this is. "This is Master Sergeant Sarah Coleman. Operation Red Sand, Panama, 1989. "Never heard of it or her." Victoria pulled out her phone. "Security, I need someone removed from the cemetery entrance." Sarah touched Hayes' arm. "It's fine, Commander. I shouldn't have come. I just wanted to say goodbye." "No," Hayes said firmly. She turned to Victoria. "Your father was a second lieutenant in Panama. His unit was ambushed. 30 men walked into a kill zone. Your father took shrapnel in the chest and legs in the first 30 seconds. "My father was wounded several times in his career," Victoria said impatiently. "His valor is well documented." "Your father was bleeding out," Hayes continued. "The medic was dead. The captain was dead. The extraction point was compromised. The only reason he lived, the only reason any of them lived, was because Sergeant Coleman held a bridge against 2 companies of enemy fighters while the wounded were evacuated." Sarah was looking at the ground. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Hayes said. "They wouldn't. The report said you were shot 4 times, stabbed twice, had a concussion from a grenade, and you kept fighting." The rain was getting heavier. Other funeral guests were starting to notice the commotion at the gate. A Pentagon official Sarah recognized, but who clearly didn't recognize her, walked past, muttering about inappropriate spectacles at such a solemn occasion. Victoria was typing on her phone, trying to verify Hayes' claims. Her expression shifted as she found something. "This is classified information. How do I know you're really this person?" Sarah rolled up her right sleeve, revealing a mass of scar tissue. Shrapnel from the first mortar attack. She pulled her collar aside, showing a puckered scar near her collarbone. Bullet from an AK-47, hour 3. She lifted her coat slightly, revealing her side. Bayonet, hour 5. Your father tried to tourniquet this one with his belt while I covered our position. The report says Coleman was KIA, Victoria said, but her voice had lost its certainty. The report says what needed to be said, Sarah replied. Dead soldiers are easier to honor than broken ones. Dead heroes don't show up with PTSD and medical bills. They don't remind people of the real cost. A military sedan pulled up, and a man in a Marine Corps dress uniform stepped out. This was Colonel Marcus Webb, representing the Joint Chiefs. He walked purposefully toward the checkpoint, then stopped abruptly when he saw Sarah. Coleman, his voice was shocked. Sarah Coleman. Sarah sighed. Hello, Marcus. Jesus Christ, you're alive. You're actually alive. He turned to the others. This woman is the reason I'm standing here. I was a corporal at Red Sand. Took 3 bullets trying to get to the bridge. She dragged me to cover while laying down suppressing fire. Victoria looked between them, her worldview crumbling. This can't be real. Webb pulled out his wallet and removed an old, faded photograph. It showed a group of young soldiers, dirty and bloodied but alive. Sarah was in the center, barely standing, held up by 2 others. One of them was unmistakably a young William Morrison. Your father carried this photo everywhere, Webb said to Victoria. Said it reminded him that he owed every day of his life, every promotion, every achievement, his marriage, you and your siblings, all of it, to the woman who bled herself nearly dry so others could live. Then why didn't he ever mention her? Victoria demanded. Why isn't she in any of his stories? Because I asked him not to, Sarah said quietly. The Sarah Coleman who did those things? She needed to disappear. Too many enemies, too many people who would have come looking for revenge, or worse, too many people who would have wanted to turn me into something I'm not. What do you mean? Sarah met Victoria's eyes. I'm not a hero, Mrs. Blackwell. I'm a killer. I killed 63 men that day. I can still see their faces, every single one. Your father understood that. He knew the weight of what I carried, so he carried the secret instead. Hayes had been on her radio. Now she stepped forward. I've spoken to the funeral director. You're coming in as my guest, Master Sergeant. I don't want to cause a disruption. The only disruption is that you've been standing in the rain while people who never bled for this country walk past you. Hayes' voice was sharp with anger. You're coming to this funeral. But Sarah was looking past them at the ceremony. The honor guard was preparing for the 21-gun salute. It's almost over anyway. I just wanted to be here when they put him in the ground, to keep watch one last time. Webb stepped forward. Sarah, please, the general would want you there. The general is dead, Sarah said bluntly. What he wants doesn't matter anymore. She reached into her pocket and pulled out what she'd been holding, a challenge coin, old and worn. I just wanted to leave this on his casket. He gave it to me at Red Sand, said when everything was over we'd have a beer and I could give it back. Victoria took the coin, examining it. It was her father's first unit coin from when he was a lieutenant. The edges were smooth from years of handling. 34 years, Sarah continued. Never got that beer. He was always too important, too public. I was always too hidden, too dangerous to acknowledge, but every year that phone call. You good, Coleman? Good enough, Morrison? Need anything? Just need you to stop asking. Same dance every year. When did he last call? Victoria asked. 6 weeks ago, from his hospital bed. Could barely talk, but he called. Sarah's composure finally cracked, tears mixing with rain on her face. Told him I'd see him at the funeral. He laughed, said I'd never break cover for him. I said maybe it was time, he said. She stopped, unable to continue. Sarah stood in the rain, struggling to finish her sentence. He said, don't you dare, Coleman. You stay hidden, you stay safe. That's an order. His last order to me. Commander Hayes put her hand on Sarah's shoulder. You're disobeying that order by being here. First time for everything, Sarah said with a weak smile. Besides, he's not here to court-martial me. The 21-gun salute began, the shots echoing across the cemetery. Sarah automatically stood at attention, her body responding to decades of training despite the Parkinson's that made her hands shake. Victoria watched her, seeing for the first time not a poor old woman in a cheap coat, but a warrior saying goodbye to a brother in arms. You loved him. It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway. Not like you're thinking. We were family in the way only soldiers can be, bound by blood and terror and the promise that neither of us would die alone. She paused. I broke that promise. He wasn't alone, Victoria said. Mother was with him, we all were. But I wasn't, the one person who knew what he carried, who understood the nightmares, who could have. Sarah stopped. It doesn't matter now. A commotion at the main funeral drew their attention. The Secretary of Defense had arrived and was speaking with Margaret Morrison, the general's widow. Even from a distance, they could see her composure, the perfect military wife, gracious even in grief. She doesn't know about you, does she? Hayes asked. She knows there was someone. William told her that much. That someone from his past would always be watching, always be protecting. She probably thought it was romantic nonsense. Webb had been on his phone, and now he looked up with urgency. We have a problem. Someone leaked that you're here. Press is already asking questions about the ghost of Panama attending General Morrison's funeral. Sarah's face went pale. No press, I need to leave. Why are you so afraid? Victoria asked. You're a hero, you should be celebrated. Celebrated? Sarah laughed bitterly. Do you know what happened after Panama? The enemies I made. Not just there, but in Somalia, Bosnia, Afghanistan. Do you know how many people would love to know Sarah Coleman is still alive? She pulled back her coat, revealing more scars. These aren't all from Panama. Some are from the 3 times people found me over the years, people looking for revenge. The last time was 8 years ago. A nephew of someone I killed in Somalia tracked me to a diner in Kansas. I was 53 and arthritic, but muscle memory doesn't care about age. What happened? Hayes asked. What always happens. I survived. He didn't. Local police called it self-defense. I disappeared again. New name, new town, new life. She looked at Victoria. That's why your father kept the secret. Every time he thought about acknowledging me, someone else from my past would surface. He had a family to protect. The funeral ceremony was concluding. The flag was being folded with crisp precision, each fold a goodbye, each movement a final honor. Sarah watched from the gate, her hand over her heart. Taps began to play, the mournful notes carrying across the cemetery. Sarah's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Webb stepped closer. Sarah, there's something you should know. The general left instructions. If you ever surfaced, if you ever came forward, there was something he wanted you to have. He pulled out an envelope from his inner pocket. Sarah's name was written on it in William's shaky handwriting. Sarah took it with trembling hands but didn't open it. Later, when I'm alone. The funeral was ending. People were beginning to move toward their cars, heading to the reception. Several noticed the small group at the gate, including some Pentagon officials who recognized Webb and Hayes. General Patricia Santos, Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, approached. She was one of the few women at Sarah's level of seniority who would understand what she had accomplished in an era when women weren't supposed to be in combat. Commander Hayes, is there a situation here? Hayes straightened. General Santos, this is Master Sergeant Sarah Coleman. Santos' eyes widened. Coleman is dead, has been for 34 years. Apparently not, ma'am. Santos studied Sarah carefully, noting the telltale signs, the scars, the stance, the eyes that had seen too much. My God, you're really her, the Red Sand Report. I studied it at the War College. They use it as an example of individual valor beyond comprehension. They shouldn't, Sarah said. It gives young soldiers the wrong idea, makes them think one person can change everything. Sometimes you just get lucky. Lucky? Santos' voice rose. You call holding a bridge for 6 hours against 200 enemies lucky. I call it Tuesday in a bad week, Sarah said dryly. Despite the solemn occasion, Santos almost smiled. Why surface now? Why risk it? Sarah looked toward the grave where workers were beginning to lower the casket. Because every soldier deserves to have their brothers and sisters at their funeral, even if one of them has to watch from the gate. Margaret Morrison was walking toward them, having noticed the gathering. She was 75, elegant even in grief, her silver hair perfect despite the rain. She looked at the group with polite confusion. Victoria, darling, is everything all right? We need to leave for the reception. Victoria looked at Sarah, then at her mother. Mom, this is someone Dad knew from Panama. Margaret's expression changed subtly, a flash of recognition or maybe fear. Panama was a long time ago. Yes, it was, Sarah agreed. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Morrison. Your husband was a good man. Margaret studied her carefully. You're her, aren't you? The ghost he talked about when the nightmares were bad, the one he said would always be out there watching. I tried to be. Margaret's composure cracked slightly. He called out for you near the end, said Coleman over and over. We didn't know what it meant. Sarah's legs nearly buckled. Webb caught her arm, steadying her. He talked about a debt he could never repay, Margaret continued. Said everything good in his life came from 5 minutes of someone else's courage. Was that you? It was 6 hours, not 5 minutes, Webb interjected, and she paid for every second of it. Margaret moved closer to Sarah, studying her face. Show me. It wasn't a request. Sarah understood. This woman had lived with the ghost of Panama for 35 years. She deserved to see the price. Sarah opened her coat fully, revealing the full extent of her injuries. The scars were a roadmap of violence, bullet wounds, knife wounds, shrapnel patterns. Margaret reached out, then stopped. May I? Sarah nodded. Margaret's fingers traced a particularly nasty scar across Sarah's ribs. This one nearly killed me, Sarah said quietly. Your husband stuffed it with his torn uniform to stop the bleeding, ruined his lieutenant's bars. He was so upset about that. Middle of a firefight, and he was worried about destroying military property. Margaret laughed through her tears. That sounds like William. She pulled Sarah into an unexpected embrace. Thank you for giving him back to me. Thank you for our children, our grandchildren, our life together. Sarah stood rigid, unused to physical contact, then slowly returned the embrace. Part 4, The Reckoning. As Margaret pulled away, she noticed Sarah's hands trembling more violently. You're ill. Parkinson's, early stages. I've got a few good years left. Are you getting treatment? The VA. Sarah laughed bitterly. The VA treats veterans. According to official records, I died in 1989. Hard to get treatment when you don't exist. General Santos pulled out her phone immediately. That changes now. I'm calling Walter Reed. You'll be seen today. I don't care what you want, Master Sergeant. You've sacrificed enough. It's time someone took care of you. The reception crowd was growing restless. Important people needed to make appearances, to be seen grieving appropriately. But here at the gate, something more important was happening. Victoria had opened the envelope Webb had given Sarah. May I read it? It's addressed to you, but... Sarah nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Victoria read aloud. Sarah, if you're reading this, then you broke your promise to stay hidden, and I'm glad. 35 years is too long to be a ghost. The world needs to know what you did, not for glory, but so other soldiers know what's possible. So my daughter knows that heroes aren't just men in uniforms with political connections. Sometimes they're women who do impossible things and then disappear because the world isn't ready for them. I've lived a good life, Sarah. A life I didn't deserve, a life you gave me. The only thing I regret is that we never got that beer. Take care of yourself, soldier. That's my last order. William. There was a second page. Victoria continued reading. P.S. I've left instructions with my lawyer. There's an account in your real name. It's not much, but it should help with medical bills. Don't argue. You've never taken a damn thing from anyone. Take this. Let me repay a fraction of what I owe. Sarah was crying openly now, something she hadn't done in decades. The rain had stopped, and weak December sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the scene at the gate. A news van pulled up across the street, then another. Webb cursed under his breath. Someone definitely leaked this. Sarah started to back away, but Margaret grabbed her arm. No, you've hidden long enough. You stand with us, your family. Mrs. Morrison, you don't understand. If I'm exposed. Then we'll protect you, Margaret said firmly. The same way you protected William. General Santos stepped forward. Master Sergeant Coleman, by authority of the Chief of Staff of the Army, I'm offering you immediate reinstatement with full benefits, back pay for 34 years, and a security detail for as long as you need it. I don't want. This isn't what you want, it's what you're owed. Santos' voice was steel. You've been fighting alone for 34 years, you don't have to anymore. The journalists were approaching, cameras rolling. Sarah's instinct was to run, to disappear, to become another ghost in another town. But Margaret's hand was firm on her arm, and Victoria stood on her other side. and suddenly she was surrounded by a protective circle of military personnel. The first reporter, a young woman with ambitious eyes, pushed forward. "General Santos, can you confirm that this is Sarah Coleman, the ghost of Panama?" Santos looked at Sarah, asking permission with her eyes. Sarah gave the tiniest nod. "This is Master Sergeant Sarah Coleman, recipient of the Silver Star with Valor, 4 Purple Hearts, and 3 Bronze Stars. She's a hero who's been denied recognition for too long." The questions came rapid fire. Why was she declared dead? Where has she been? Why surface now? Sarah stepped forward, and the crowd went quiet. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded in combat. "I'm here to honor General William Morrison, a good soldier and a better man. That's all." "But the reports say you're a hero." "The reports are wrong," Sarah interrupted. "I'm a soldier who did her job, nothing more." An older reporter, someone who had covered military affairs for decades, asked, "Is it true you held the bridge at Red Sand alone for 6 hours?" Sarah looked at him. "Time moves differently in combat. Could have been 6 minutes, could have been 6 days. All I know is I held until I didn't need to anymore." "How many enemy combatants did you kill?" Sarah's expression hardened. "Every question you ask about killing dishonors the memory of the man we're burying today. This is his day, not mine." She turned to leave, but a voice from the crowd stopped her. "Murderer." Everyone turned. A man in his 40s pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with rage. "My uncle died at that bridge. You murdered him." The security detail moved immediately, but Sarah held up her hand. "Your uncle was a soldier. So was I. We both did what we were ordered to do. He was a patriot fighting American imperialism. He was a man with a gun trying to kill wounded soldiers. I stopped him." Sarah's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I'd do it again." The man lunged forward, but Webb and another Marine intercepted him, restraining him as he screamed profanities. The cameras captured everything. Victoria stepped in front of Sarah, protective. "This is what you were afraid of, people like him. People like him have found me 3 times over the years. Each time I've had to disappear again, start over. New name, new life, new lies." "Not anymore," Margaret said firmly. She turned to General Santos. "I want protection for her, the best you have." "Ma'am, with respect, you can't order. My husband gave 30 years to this country, never asked for anything for himself. I'm asking now, protect the woman who saved him." Santos nodded. "Consider it done." As security removed the angry man, more people from the funeral approached. Some Sarah recognized, soldiers from other operations, people who knew the classified stories. They saluted her one by one, a line of warriors acknowledging one of their own. Master Sergeant James Riley, who had been a private at Red Sand, pushed through in his wheelchair. Both legs gone to an IED in Iraq, but alive because Sarah had dragged him to safety 35 years ago. "Coleman," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "thought you were dead." "Disappointed." "Hell no, just pissed you let us think it for so long." He looked at the others. "This woman saved 8 of us at that bridge. Would have been 9, but Thompson died in my arms while she held the line." More soldiers approached, men and women who had heard the stories, studied the tactics, learned from the legend. A female Special Forces operator, one of the first allowed into combat roles, approached nervously. "Master Sergeant Coleman, I'm Captain Jessica Chen. We studied your tactics at training. The Panama Bridge defense is required reading now. They call it the Coleman Stand." Sarah looked uncomfortable. "They should call it the Lucky Break or the Stupid Last Stand." "They call it brilliant," Chen insisted. "You turned a fixed position into a mobile defense, using the bridge's structure to create multiple fighting positions. You anticipated enemy movements and created kill zones with limited ammunition. It's genius." "It's desperation. When you can't retreat and you can't die, you get creative." The crowd was growing. The funeral reception was essentially abandoned as everyone gathered around Sarah. She looked overwhelmed, pressing back against the fence. Hayes noticed her distress. "All right, everyone back, give her space." But it was too late. Sarah's legs buckled. The stress, the memories, the Parkinson's, it all crashed down at once. Webb caught her before she hit the ground. "Medic," someone shouted. Sarah waved them off. "I'm fine, just need a minute." Margaret knelt beside her, regardless of her expensive dress. You're not fine. You haven't been fine for 34 years, have you? Sarah looked at her, this woman who had lived with William Morrison's ghost secondhand. How did you stand it? The nightmares, the survivor's guilt, the weight of it all. I had him, he had me. Who did you have? No one by design, safer that way. To hell with safe, Margaret said fiercely. You're coming home with us. What? You heard me. Victoria has a guest house. You're staying there until we figure out your medical care, your benefits, your life. I can't. You held a bridge for my husband. You can accept a guest house from his widow. Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her. Soldiers, civilians, reporters, all watching the ghost of Panama struggle to her feet. Victoria and Margaret helped her stand. I don't know how to be visible, Sarah admitted. I've been hiding for so long. Then we'll teach you, Victoria said. The same way you taught those young soldiers to survive, one day at a time. General Santos approached again. Master Sergeant Coleman, there's one more thing. The Secretary of Defense has authorized me to offer you the Medal of Honor for your actions at Red Sand. Sarah shook her head immediately. No, absolutely not. You earned it. I earned a lot of things, doesn't mean I want them. She looked at the crowd. Medals are for the living to feel better about the dead. I'm neither, I'm just tired. Then what do you want? Santos asked. Sarah thought for a moment. I want the families of the men I killed at that bridge to know their sons and fathers and brothers died as soldiers. Not enemies, not terrorists, not evil. Just soldiers doing what they were told, same as me. The crowd was silent. This wasn't the response they expected from a hero. I want the VA to take care of soldiers like Riley here, who lost his legs in a war that nobody remembers for reasons nobody can explain. I want female operators like Captain Chen to not have to pretend they're less capable than they are. I want the nightmares to stop, but they won't, so I'll settle for people understanding that heroes aren't heroes. We're just people who ran toward danger instead of away, and we pay for it every day after. She looked at Margaret, and I want to visit your husband's grave, alone, to say goodbye properly. Margaret nodded, of course. The crowd began to disperse slowly. The news vans packed up, having gotten their story. The Pentagon officials made their notes. The soldiers returned to their duties. An hour later, Sarah stood alone at William Morrison's fresh grave. The earth was still dark and unsettled. She knelt carefully, her bad leg protesting, and placed the challenge coin on the temporary marker. Debt paid, Morrison, she whispered, though you'd argue, you stubborn bastard. She stayed there as the sun set, an old warrior keeping last watch over a brother in arms. Behind her, at a respectful distance, Margaret and Victoria waited. Not interrupting, just ensuring she wasn't alone anymore. 3 months later, Sarah Coleman stood in the Rose Garden as the president placed the Medal of Honor around her neck. She'd fought the decision, but Margaret Morrison had been persuasive. Not for you, she'd said. For every female soldier who needs to know what's possible. The citation read in part, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty. It listed the statistics, 6 hours, 200 enemies, 8 soldiers saved. But it couldn't capture the reality, the fear, the pain, the terrible arithmetic of combat where life and death are measured in ammunition remaining and minutes until rescue. Sarah stood there, surrounded by the powerful and important, wearing a uniform for the first time in 34 years. Her Parkinson's medication helped with the tremors. The therapy helped with the nightmares. The Morrison family's friendship helped with the loneliness. When the ceremony ended, she walked to a quiet corner of the garden where Captain Chen and a group of female operators waited. So Chen asked, what now? Sarah looked at these young warriors, seeing herself decades ago. Now I teach. Now I tell the truth about what combat really costs. Now I make sure no one else has to be a ghost. She touched the medal on her chest. This isn't mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever held a line, taken a hill, or saved a buddy. I'm just carrying it for a while. As she walked back to where Margaret and Victoria waited, Sarah Coleman allowed herself a small smile. The ghost of Panama was finally at peace, not because the fighting was over, that would never truly end, but because she no longer had to fight alone. At William Morrison's grave, the challenge coin had been embedded in his permanent headstone at Margaret's insistence. Below his name and rank, a small inscription read, "Saved at Red Sand Bridge, forever grateful." And somewhere in Arlington's records, a new entry was made. Sarah Coleman, Master Sergeant, United States Army, Medal of Honor, still serving. Because some soldiers never really leave their post, they just find new bridges to hold.